tell. We are 4 years apart. We grew up in Roseville, California, which is a suburb of Sacramento, and moved a little bit. We went to college and things in the Bay Area, but not the same school. Let's see, Teruko went to the University of Texas in Austin for her MFA. I came up here for my PhD in English at UW Seattle. And after a time of living apart for a while, I dragged her up here and her family. And so they've been living here since 2019. Let's see, so that's the sort of broad arc of this. And we have worked together on different projects, but this is our first actual talk together. My good friend Kenji Hamai Stoll, who curated that fantastic exhibit out there, Echoes of the Floating World, came to me because he knew about my work on Tacoma's Japantown, and he has incorporated part of that imagery as symbols in his mural, and wanted to know if I wanted to talk a little bit more. And I said, sure, can I bring my sister? And he said, sure, so here we are. But really, we had, and really putting together this talk, we came to realize, I came to realize anyway, that a lot of what we do now grew out of our growing up in a really rich set of cultural traditions. And both of us have worked a lot with our Japanese-American side. We're half Japanese, half Filipina. We like to say, I like to say anyway, that my right side is Japanese and my left half is Filipina. Anyway, our mom is Filipina. She came to the United States in, the 1950s. And our dad was Japanese American and born in the United States. And let's see, I'm probably talking too much for both of us. No. This might be too much of a familiar dynamic. So anyway, let's see. But mostly we wanted to kind of share what it was to grow up in this very rich set of traditions, and to show you how that manifested differently for us in the work that we've done. And I think it really, we went to the exhibit and found that it really echoes very nicely with that exhibit and with the work that we do. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Let's see. Anybody else want to add intro-wise? I will try not to talk too much for both of us, I promise.
You'll hear a lot from me when I'm in the middle.
I found this picture kind of recently of the two of us, and it kind of worked really well because both of us are in our yukatas. They're summer kimonos, basically. They were made for us, custom made by our relatives in Japan. And once we got them, it looks like they're all where we were wearing them all the time.
Every special occasion that we got.
Yes. And so for a while, because, well, our family photo collection is a bit of, it's not as curated in some places as you might hope. And so we didn't know when that was taken or where it was taken. We thought, well, maybe it's Japan, but we couldn't tell for sure. But then I put on my little historian research hat and went, that fan, you see that fan that my sister's holding there? That's a Filipino fan. And so we figured out that this was probably taken at our Filipina grandmother's house, and she would have had a fan like that, because that's not a Japanese shaped fan, but it kind of fits, right? Like it's both of us, it's both of our heritages, right, that we're holding. And really we were encouraged, I would say, more to kind of dive into our Japanese American side for a few reasons that we'll talk about a little more later. So anyway, it kind of worked. We were super little. Not today. Thank you. Super fun. Let's see. This is a slide just because I always like to talk about our family and where we came from. So let's see. Do you want to say anything about the photos first before I talk forever?
No, I'm just noting that we are slightly older in this picture and still in the same.
See?
This was at another event, I think it was like a Halloween or something.
Maybe, yeah.
But, yeah, we love those.
Yeah, we love those. And I always point that out because our mom is hiding, our Filipina mom is hiding right behind a fan there. And that is so characteristic, right, of how we grew up. Like, she really didn't have us dive into being Filipina very much. She had a whole interesting history of being in the Philippines, and once she left, and she hasn't been back. And so for her to be in a yukata as well, and hiding, just seems like a really emblematic moment.
Yeah, it speaks to the way that we really focused a lot on exploring our Japanese side.
Yes.
And also partly because of the Japanese.
Right.
Our father. Right. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yes. I will get to that for sure. On the left there is a picture of some of our extended family. Our dad had 5 siblings, and so sitting in the front there are our grandparents, our dad's parents, who our grandfather died in the 1960 actually, and then our grandmother died when I was like 2, I think, or 3. So I didn't really have very many memories of her. But that picture, I believe, was taken in the 1950s after they had all been released from a prison camp for being Japanese American and Japanese. But I believe it's one of the only pictures of all of them together, all the siblings and the parents. And it's interesting to note, for me anyway, the difference between the grandparents, right, those immigrant folks like sitting in the very front, the expression on their faces, right, and then the expression on the siblings' faces, right. There's just so much contrast, right, and hope and optimism, right.
There's a lightness to it.
Yeah, right. And then in front there is an uncle who married into the family, and then there's a top in arms who was our cousin, but everybody else was in those prison camps. So anyway, roots are important to both of us, so I thought that was a good show there. Okay, so now we're going to tell you about our house. I know. It's not a house that we have anymore, unfortunately. It was in Rosewood, California, suburb of Sacramento. Our dad and his brother, right, built the house. And I just looked it up recently for my book, and it was 13-something square feet, like 1350 square feet. So it's really small.
Pretty small.
Right, for 4 of us. Yeah. But one of the things that we both remember a lot is that we had parties at this house. Right? Do you remember the parties? You do, right?
Yeah, I mean, Dad would invite the relatives, and they would come and they'd stay with us even overnight. But we would have these. I remember this table, and wanting just to go underneath it because all of my aunts and uncles and cousins were lined up along the table, and so that was like the most safe, comforting place I feel like I could think to be, was just amidst all of them underneath, kind of hidden. But that's like a really strong memory of mine, being surrounded by all my aunties and cousins.
And the laughing,
all
and
of that,
food.
all of the food.
Yeah, all the food.
These were from our New Year's party, which he would have us, they would do, and they really tried to continue to do every year, and I don't think we ever really missed a New Year's celebration. It was really important to our family, and just the sheer effort that all of the siblings put into making the party happen. People brought their specialty dish, their food that was their proud moment to share with the family.
Which we'll show you in a minute. You're going to get hungry.
Yes. And just the pattern, and it was our job to set the tables.
Yes.
Right? So that was one of the most wonderful parts, was just
getting out all the special dishes.
all the special dishes and putting them together and having this grand setting, and this parade almost of the beautiful Japanese dishes.
Yeah, I mean, normally, right, we had a sort of like, 4-person dinner table, right? But for these parties, we basically would bring in this special table that our dad had built to hire someone to build, to host these parties. So we'd bring in the big table from the garage, we would expand the 4-person table because it had leaves, and then when we bring out the special tablecloths, when I was really little, I remember making place cards for everybody.
Yes.
Do you know place cards?
And foot massage.
Oh yeah, foot massages for some people. What else?
All under the table.
Yeah. Oh, and I want yes, well under the table. And I wanted to point out too that on almost every window or door in our house was a shoji screen of some kind. And most of them, I think, were what their parents built.
Yeah.
And put together. So I guess when I was a toddler, the screens at the front of the house, they faced in, right? So they weren't double-sided necessarily. So all you saw from the street was just this sort of wall of white paper, right, that would slide back and forth. But inside, you would see the frame, right, the wooden shoji screen frame. So almost every window in our house had that. So on the left side, right, you can see that that's one they had. When I was tiny, they had actual like rice paper on the screens, but I was a tiny, toddler who would poke holes in this paper, so they changed it to a different kind of paper by the time you came around.
Yeah, wise.
Yes, I thought so too. But yeah, the special dishes and the special parties were a big part of our childhood.
And it was really an island, I feel like. It was nestled in the middle of all of these very normal, like, sort of low-income suburban houses that had chain link fence and, like, really boring bushes. And we had beautiful ivy and pine trees and it was in a pond with fish in it.
With goldfish in it in the front.
And it was tiny, but it was this weird island. I mean, it really was.
It really was. It was a huge pine tree over the ivy.
Kind of took over the whole front space.
Yeah, and then we had, and I in my book I talk about this, that our mom kind of made that the yard like her little orchard basically. So there were like grapefruit trees and persimmon trees, and there was a plum tree.
Yes.
Okay.
And an orange tree.
And an orange tree.
Roses.
Did you have roses too? Oh, we did have roses. That's right. And a little bamboo grove next to the pond, and a huge leaf, a whole hedge of like bay leaf trees in the front.
So it's super aromatic, like the whole space.
Yes.
Like you enter and it's just like, orange oil and bay leaf and all the things.
The grapefruit.
The pine, the cedar. It was very like sensory, I feel like. And then the water, of course. There was water as well.
Yes, I like. See, this is why sibling things are so fun, right? Because she remembers these things that I remember. I'm like, oh yeah, there was that.
Yeah.
I also really loved that there was a whole row of pineapple guava bushes in front of the house. So pineapple guava bushes, fence, pine tree, ivy, grapefruit trees, persimmon trees, orange
cedar
trees,
fence.
cedar fence, like everything, all this stuff. And it was very unsuburban. Very, very unsuburban.
Yeah.
No lawn. Just the ivy. So anyway, that was something that was special about growing up. So I just wanted to read you a little bit about what that was like with the house. What I remember about the house, and this is from a book that I have coming out next year, are those screens. So that is a picture of one of the screen doors that we had. So here, I'm going to read this and actually. The light in that house is the thing that I remember the most. The quality of California sunlight warming the paper of our Japanese American shoji screens. That light and the vaulted, knotty pine ceilings that opened up the bungalow living room. The way the pine tree outside cast shadows that looked like brush paintings on the shoji screens. So yeah, I remember the light a lot because we had in every window and every door had those shoji screens, right? The quality of light coming in was always this kind of filtered light, coming in. Yeah, so really, really beautiful. Okay, so here's another her more party scenes. But you can see a better picture, right, of those doors.
These are
Right.
Polaroids too.
Yeah.
My dad loved to take Polaroids.
And pictures for slides.
Yeah.
So you can see like all that, all those windows, all those doors, those special dishes that got out. There's a cabinet in the very back of that picture that had, it was the China cabinet, so it had like glasses and then all the special dishes. Yeah. And then on the right, there's legendary content again. Looks like that was her birthday,
Yes.
I'm guessing. And then there were fans on the wall. We grew up with a bunch of like figurines too, like dolls and maneki nekos, which Teruko will talk about. And so it really was the space, right, of just, lots and lots of like visually representations of who we were. And this is, the 1970s, 1980s. So that's kind of, for us to be Japanese American and Filipino American in a predominantly white suburb of Sacramento meant that our parents really were like filling us with all these cultural things that were not around us. And so really one of the big themes, I think, of our talk that tonight is talking about just sort of what do you do with, these rich memories and how can they possibly counteract what the larger environment is like, and then what kind of loss, how do we think about memory and how do we think about loss? So, okay, there's our house. Oh yeah, you can see the lantern even hanging up at the top on the left there. We had several lanterns like that hanging through the house. And there's our mom. Meeting mom. Okay, food. We warned you, you're gonna get hungry. So every year, as you said, our family would come together at one person's house, and for many years it was our house. So we brought out all the dishes, and then basically we would just wait for people to come in and bring their food and leave their shoes at the door. So we had these piles of shoes in the kitchen. And on the left there is our Auntie Nessan, who is our oldest auntie. We called her Nessan because that's what the siblings all called her. And Nessan actually means older sister. Her name was Hisa, but everybody was like, oh, Nessan this, Nessan that, so we all called her Auntie Nessan. Auntie Nessan. And that is her with her famous chow mein.
It took so many hours to make all the prepping and the cutting, and the sauce was all from scratch. It's all very specialized, and she had to make it every year all by herself. I mean,
in addition to a bunch of other things.
Salad and like crab salad, cucumber salad. I mean, it was a feast.
Yeah, so you can see on the right.
And that was
there.
just one of the aunties that was bringing.
Right. So like there are mountains and mountains of food. Let's see, I don't know what's in the front there actually. Is that sukiyaki? Oh, it's a sukiyaki? Okay, sukiyaki, and then yes, one of our aunties, one of our aunties married a man who was Puerto Rican, and so she would bring, in addition to several kinds of flan, huge dishes of arroz con gandules. So yeah, these beautiful rice and bean things. And okay, do I have to show? Yes, here we go. There's our mom's lumpia over there. And then on the left, there's the beautifully cut slices of sashimi. All of that to say, though, it's funny. Until we were planning this talk, I didn't think really what that would mean for an artist growing up, like a visual artist growing up. And so this is, I think, how we get to transition to Teruko talking about her work and how that manifested. You can just tell me, oh, there's one more slide, sorry. On the right, that's getting the bowls ready for the New Year's ozoni, special ceremonial soup that everybody would drink first thing. And then on the left, that's our cousin making the temaki, right? It was a kapamaki maybe? Or no? Oh, fuzumaki, you're right. But the thing about, all these multiple things, right, and hands touching each one, right? Like, it was almost all from scratch. Like, almost nobody brought, like, a chocolate cookies from the store,
No,
or
yeah.
no, right? It would be a no. That was not done. So yeah, lots of food. So anyway, this all transitions nicely, I think, to Teruko, having grown up in this environment and how that, translated itself into her work. You can just tell me.
So the dishes, of course, were like, a special thing that made a big impression on me, those beautiful dishes and the specialness of the offerings that our aunties and moms and dads and uncles would put on these special platters that we only used at certain times of the year. And I think, and all the repetition and the multiples and all of that labor, I feel like I just soaked that in visually in a lot of ways, and you'll see in the way that I later that like repetition and multiples are really important to like the way that I work, and I think part of it stems from just this kind of
visual buffet.
Yeah. The writer. Yes, for the way that I like to make items and the way that my installations and sculptures kind of come together. But I'm going to start out talking a little bit about some of the work that's in the store that I'm really excited about. It's a new series of work that is all pottery, and I work in many different ways. And I think I love all the materials. I love touching everything and feeling everything, and so it's hard for me to stay in one place, and I feel like I work often in this sort of spiral that informs, like, I work with clay, and then I work with fabric, and then I work with, wood, and then paper, and then, I draw, and then I do ink, and then, it's just this kind of
So she's super talented in a bunch of ways.
sort of spiral that informs itself, like, continuously in this kind of big circular motion. And so, this imagery, this is the Hanafuda game. It's a traditional game that was from the Heian period, I guess, in Japan. It's been around for a really long time. 12 suits, and each suit represents a month of the year. And so, and apparently, and this is things that I learned later, I started using this imagery on my pottery because of my fond memories of the layered experiences playing with, like, my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and
we did play this
mom
game.
and dad, playing it as a little girl. But the suits and the images are so telling, and I guess they were used to be used as a way for like common people to understand the like cultural values of the elite or right? And so that sort of thing, it was this like codification of almost the cultural values of the Japanese. And I didn't know that, but I felt a significance about them. And I knew there was a seasonality about it, but I didn't know exactly that each one was, this was pine, and this is irises, and that represents February and March. And I didn't know that, but I felt it. And I felt this kind of messaging coming across generations. It's like all the way back from the Heian period. I've always been sort of searching for, like, what is Japanese and what does that mean as a mixed race American woman in the 2025, And so I think it's just, and I also feel like this imagery, like other Asians, Japanese, Korean particularly, they both play this game. Koreans do too. Yeah, and that it's this sort of touchstone that it's like a call out almost. And when I started seeing, so the next slide, I think, there, if you see the mural out there.
If you go to Echoes of the Floating World, that exhibit, have folks seen that exhibit yet? It's really, really cool, and there's a huge wall-sized mural, and so I took a picture of that particular image from that mural. So you can see, right, that there's, it's an imagery that gets used, right?
And it's this like, hey, it's a call out almost. It's like a, hi, I see you too. It's almost this, because it was so rare that as, growing up in a Caucasian, mostly, Caucasian suburb without, I mean, I don't think I had my first Japanese friend until, or Filipino friend for that matter. I don't know if I had an Asian. Yeah, really. Filipino I had in like college. So really it was this like recognition of existence almost, where it's like, oh, there's a little bit something there, and like, because there's nothing in the media. Nobody looked like me. You know, nobody had like immigrant experience, you know, on like Malcolm in the Middle or, you know, whatever. There was no Asian Malcolm in the Middle then. And so it was always this like feeling of being seen and like acknowledgement in a way that I felt like lacking in a lot of ways in regular life. And so to see Kenji use it and here, and coming here from Texas, and then also before that from Sacramento, where, you know, where we were, it wasn't very Asian at all, and then there was like so many of us here. So, I feel like, wow, you know, so exciting because so I just wanted to show that we
really can see it. It's so cool.
Mural, and that it will be going away. Like they're going to be painting
over it.
And I'm so sad about it because like, it's so beautiful. But yeah, it was, hey there, hi, it's so nice to see you. So that we took like yesterday, actually, that picture. Exciting.
Okay.
So this is some of the new pottery that I'm working on, and it's really just this. I'm still kind of experimenting with how I'm applying the images and like what clay body I'm using and like all the surface decisions. And so these ones that are in the store are actually kind of special in a way because they're almost like first draft tests in a way, but they're prototypes. I mean, they're very like new and exciting.
They're really pretty.
And they're porcelain and like they're all, you know, cone 5, cone 6 porcelain with underglazes. And I mean, just exploring these images and offering them to people in a way for them to enjoy them as they eat, but also like, what is that? You know, that seems familiar. Like maybe I'm gonna, you know, investigate what this imagery is, you know.
Or they might already know.
Or they might already know where it's like, high five, you know, like, I see you, you know. So that's some of the work, and I have just a couple more images of this body of work. So it's just been such a joy and fun. And after being on, I was artist in residence for the city of Tacoma, which I loved. But it's a different like mode of making, I feel like. You're sort of service to the public and to the city's mission and all of that. And so I'm like just wrapping that up right now. So I'm returning to like what I want to think about and what I want to talk about in a way that's more personal to like what. So it's been a joy to come back to clay and feel grounded in that material and just play a little bit. So that's stuff. So, and then, so just as an aside, as a sort of extension of my practice, I was a resident at Rockland Residency in Bremerton, and as an artist there for 3 weeks, and I started actually making this piece that I'll show you later there in that beautiful protected bubble of the like Rockland Residency and the deep in the forests, and like we did clay and it's just lovely things. But then they asked me, I just randomly got to cook for a second for a retreat that they were doing there, and I ended up making like food from our family. So I made pancit and all the like did a Filipino feast for everyone and trays of lumpia, and it was just so much fun to like share that with people. It was like something that a lot of people hadn't had, that sort of Filipino American homemade food, you know, that's in this like different setting. So coming up in New Year's, the owner has asked me again to come and work and cook food, and I'm thinking of it in terms of this sort of, it's almost like a performance piece in a way, like where I'm thinking about it in terms of, it's like, I'm going to be doing 3 different menus for the retreat. It's a New Year's retreat. I'll be doing a Filipino feast, a Japanese New Year's feast with our dad's sukiyaki recipe, and then like a Southern feast for my my husband, his parents. I learned all their specialty dishes. So it's a sharing of family, and I'm hoping to like use it as a way to like share my experiences and the love that was put into all of that to start the new year for these random people that are going to be on this retreat. They're also going to do clay and yoga as well. So, I'm hoping to do like sort of food memory conversations around all that food. So I'm really excited about that in January, or December anyway. So that's that picture. The next sort of body of work I'm kind of working on developing right now is based on the collectible and the figurine. And so the idea of all the maneki neko as this, ubiquitous symbol that lots of people know, that it was this little, oh, there you are, and it was almost everywhere, right? It can be everywhere in any random Asian restaurant or store, but also it's become this sort of pop cultural thing. And but also it's deeply ingrained in the folklore and stories of Japan. And they have, this image is a shrine, actually, the maneki neko like shrine, and people bring them, and there's just oodles of them all over the place in the middle, outside, and they exist as these little sentinels almost, so these beautiful little spirits that animate the space and protect it in some ways. And so I feel that like connection, both with it being this sort of popular cultural thing, as well as this like deeply historical thing. So and there's an image from the show again in the corner that seems to me very Maneko Neki-esque. If you one of the artists that did that in the show. So this was one of my first public art pieces back in 2016. It's called 1800 Lucky Cats, and I slip cast and fired 1,800 of these in my home studio. I didn't have a kiln at the time, so I was taking these boxes and boxes of them to, and drying them and glazing them and taking them to this local ceramic shop and transporting them back and forth, and then I made this huge spiral of them, and they're really not huge. They're like 6 to 8 inches each. And it was for the Austin Animal Center. It's the largest no-kill shelter in the country. And so the 1,800 cats represented 1/10 of the animals that they serve in a year. And then I was able to sort of do a fundraiser with those. So each one was for adoption, and so people could buy one, and all that money went to the hardest, the animals that were the hardest to adopt, that they couldn't really they needed special care or whatever. So all that money, I raised $5,000 for those animals with this piece. So it was kind of like a beginning, or I've been doing multiples for a while. But I think just examining the collectible, the figurine, and what that is in terms of just the visual and the cultural significance of them. So then this is more recent work. So I'm starting to think about the maneki as just a way, like a scaffold almost, a beginning of meaning, a way to, take apart and figure out and put back together my sort of my semi-confusion about my identity and how, I've sort of fit in the larger American story. And so this one, I'm, kind of using that language of the figurine. And these are, sort of broken manekis that are put together with teapots, and this one is the like found coral that I would like kind of put inside of this broken maneki. And then the left was one that I cast that looked like its face got punched in, and I felt like that was like so 2020 at the time, or 2021. So I'm just thinking about ways to use some of these cultural symbols, and like this is just kind of the beginning of like sort of playing with the form.
And the one on the left, right, has one of those maneki nipples from the spiral, right? The
Yes.
old one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm like kind of like just stitching them together with.
But a bunch of those ended up at a restaurant in Austin.
Yes, it's there. If you ever go, it's like a big there. I don't remember what it's called. But it's like a Tokyo street food restaurant that they put them all in. You can see them there sometimes if you're in Austin. And then the last sort of body of work that I'm thinking about and working through is all based around the idea of the Koinobori and the Children's Day Festival. So in Japan, they have a festival that's supposed to celebrate the health and well-being of children, and they fly these koi carp streamers, basically, to represent the children and the family, but the carp is used as a symbol because of its resiliency. So it's in the story, the legend goes that the carp was so strong and courageous that it swam up a river upstream and became a dragon. So it was this like sort of questy kind of, and it's this beautiful story that I feel like has been passed down through this like continuous celebration of this festival. And I think the thing I'm so interested in with Japanese culture in particular is just all of the gazillion festivals there are, and how they all are pregnant with meaning. They have all of these little stories that go along with them, and they really encapsulate like the values of that society, almost that civilization. And so I was just really inspired by that imagery. And I grew up. That picture on here. On the left, that's our house, and that one koinobori was there for the whatever 20-something years we lived there, in that one spot, and that was our dining table. So I saw it every day. And my seat was the one where my mom is sitting right there. That's where I would typically sit.
See it all the time.
So I got to see it every meal almost, just like looking at it, and it just became like part of my DNA in a way, I feel like. And so now I kind of took that idea of the Koinobori festival and its significance and so this is at Rockland, where I started with this sort of these inherited handkerchiefs and textiles from my auntie Nessan, the chow mein lady, and they were pieces of fabric that I asked for when I was going to make a quilt for my kids that I never got to. And so I wanted to make art out of it, and sort of thinking about what do we do with things that we've lost, and how do we sort of conjure the essence of somebody. And so I started out with this, and I kept thinking about her becoming this like dragon as she when she died, and that I wanted to kind of like remember her that way and revive her in some ways for myself. And so you'll see, this was just happenstance, this photo that I took in that studio at Rockland of the light on there, where it was just like, it felt like this very, like, auntie, like, here's, work on that,
And you have it here.
And I have it here, so it's, sad a little bit without it being, but, this was on the second story of that green building that I showed you, that I was able to catch enough wind, because it's pretty heavy. It looks light, but it's pretty heavy and quite large. But I was able to, get it to fly, and like that's that moment where I was like, yes, it's flying, it's flying. So, and this is the first in me sort of using textiles that I've inherited from family. I have a whole collection of Auntie Sadako. I have a whole collection of our grandma, and you can see their personalities very clearly in each of these collections. And this is all cotton and, from the 40s, 50s, and I feel like, I had to hand sew it. I couldn't, machine sew it for summer. I just had to, I couldn't allow myself, I had to handle it and stitch it by hand. There was just something that felt very true.
We were all about handmade things, so that's why I had that picture of our cousin making the sushi, right? It's all about touching things, right?
The handmade, the experience of the material, the experience of that, making that as being really a part of the piece. And then I translated it also, and I'll show you the next one, yes, to when I was an artist in residence. I did this installation and worked with the students at the School of Science and Math Institute, and we did a collaboration, and we did a whole 3-week mini term about sustainability, and I had them make their own koinobori so that they would be part of this big collection.
It was all out of reclaimed grocery totes, like reusable shopping bags that people brought in.
We had this displayed during this sustainability expo, and the most wonderful part about it was just seeing the interaction with the public and them just kind of enjoying just the beauty of the wind. And so this piece is now up. It's another iteration of the koinobori piece, and it's at the Seattle Center at the Founders Court between the Cornish Playhouse, I think, and the ballet. So it's a lovely old, structure from the 60s. It feels very Mad Men in that area. And
the era of our house.
And the era of our house, and right next to it is the big Japanese bell. So it's like a perfect space for it. And it's just another sort of thinking about the delight and wanting to share that with folks through, with wind and outside. I just brought a few samples of the next body of this koinobori idea, where I'm using reclaimed textiles from the Japanese Cultural Community Center rummage sale that happens yearly. And I got, a huge box of old kimono and obi and all of these beautiful, so much hand sewing in these items that they feel so intimate, and I want to make hundreds of these of different sizes and just play with those, and I just see them in some big space just swaying with the motion of people walking around them just gently. So that's my vision and hope someday that I'll be able to do that piece someday.
How many hundreds?
I would like at least 200. That's 120, and then the other piece was 150. So if I just take my time and let them.
I just remember talking to her on the phone about the 1,800. I'm like, how many did you want? 1,800? I didn't think it was going to be that many. I was like, you're making all of these? What?
It was much more work than I expected. When it comes to all of that, I'm just having a vision and I want to do that, and I don't really think about how much time. So thank you for allowing me to share with you some of that work.
Now we're going to transition a little bit to my talk, my part. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm a creative nonfiction writer and a public historian. Over the last 8 years, I've been doing a lot of work on Tacoma's historic Japantown. And so that's partly why we were sort of tapped to do this talk. But I didn't really quite think about why I was so interested in this Japantown. So I traced it back, and part of it I think has to do with the fact that we actually had a little bit of a Japantown to go to when we were growing up. There was a place called Yorozu, which was a kind of import-export of Japanese goods thing. But in connecting it to our childhood house, it was another one of those spaces. We were like, oh, there's that. I know that. There's the dolls in the glass cases. We know those. There's the fans. There's the origami paper. There's the maneki-neko. It's like all of these. There's the dishes, right? The store had all of those things. So I actually, and the crazy thing is that Sacramento Japantown, as we knew it, was very different from when it originally started. But I always just thought, oh, we get to go to this part of Sacramento, and that felt like our Japantown. So when this store closed in 2012, I took my kids to see it because I really wanted them to see this space. So there's my kids as they're very little with the parasols. I know. With the parasols. But see, there's the dolls in glass cases. There's lanterns hanging from the top. It was another space where I felt like, oh, yeah, that's familiar. And we don't get to see this very often. And I missed that. I also went to college in the Bay Area. Both of us did, but I went to Berkeley, and I ended up basically joining a Japanese American cultural group. And one of the things that we did a lot was we went to San Francisco's Japantown. And that was truly a Japantown. It still is a Japantown, though it's changed a lot and it's changing. But it had a grocery store, several grocery stores, another space where I was like, oh, this is familiar. These are tubs of tofu and the shirataki noodles over here. There are lanterns hanging from the ceiling at the hardware store. The hardware store had origami paper and the dishes and the dolls. Yes, and it just had space. And then there's the big pagoda. It also had every year a huge cherry blossom festival that hundreds of people in the area would come to. And so I was used to then really thinking about Sacramento's Japantown and San Francisco's Japantown. These spaces where I felt like, okay, even if these other spaces are not out in the wider world as much, I can go here and feel this familiarity and feel this sense of belonging. Right? And so, all these businesses, all these restaurants, all these Japanese American community organizations. And so when I moved to Tacoma, I lived here for 10 years without knowing that Tacoma had a Japantown. A really long time to not know something. And I was so interested. On the left-hand side there is the sculpture Maru by Gerard Tsutakawa. It's behind the, I think, pizza place on Pacific out there. And I was attending the opening of the memorial, this is that memorial sculpture there, for the former Japanese language school. And I remember so clearly walking up to this memorial dedication, and there were all these Japanese people. And I was like, where have y'all been? I just didn't feel that sense. And I hadn't, like the Buddhist temple is one of our really, remaining cultural institutions. I had not gone to the temple very much. And so to have all these Japanese American people there was just this revelation to me. And in doing research on the language school and its dedication, I was like, wait a second, I need to find out more about this story that people, don't seem to know. The woman who cuts my hair grew up in Tacoma, and she was like, oh, what are you writing about now? And I said, oh, this is Tacoma's Japantown. And she was like, we have a Japantown? And I was like, you didn't know either, see? She was here in the 60s when urban renewal had destroyed so much of it. So anyway, I was looking around and researching, and on the right there, I found this map. And the map just about broke my heart, honestly. It's a hand-drawn map by the journalist Kazuo Ito. And we don't know exactly where he got all of these names, but I started looking at all these names. There's like Furuya and Yoshimoto and like all these Japanese names attached to all of these Japanese businesses. And one of them and I honestly believe this is what kind of drove me over the edge. One of the names was Uwajimaya. So if you're from the Seattle area, right, Uwajimaya is our big Pan Asian grocery store, right? It started here, people. It started here. Mr. Moriguchi sold fish cakes out of the back of his truck and then eventually opened up a storefront. You know, we are here, right, on Pac Ave, right? And this was part of where all of this was. The downtown core of Tacoma had a ton of Japanese-owned businesses, barbershops, import-export shops, restaurants, sweet shops even. There was a manju shop. But Uwajimaya honestly kind of drove me over the edge because I was like, we could have had an Uwajimaya here. We could have had, and you know, again, knowing that space of like what grocery stores can mean for a community, right? Having, you know, another space to get familiar foods and growing up and, you know, having that space to belong and to get those familiar foods and ingredients really just kind of pushed me over the edge and made me really want to know more about what Tacoma's Japanese American history has been. So one of the things that I did with my obsession was I worked with HistoryLink and did a sort of encyclopedia article about the history of the neighborhood. And then I worked with two UW professors, Lisa Hoffman and Eric Hanneman, who wrote this book called Becoming Nisei about the students of the Japanese language school. They did a lot of research for, I think, almost 2 decades, and they had a lot of stuff still to share. And so I worked with them and combined my own research and that of local historian Michael Sullivan and created a digital exhibit called Tacoma Japantown. So you can go on Tacoma Japantown at this particular site. It's hosted by the UW Library. It's got maps. In addition to the hand-drawn map that I showed you, maps where people have actually done the research to check like the businesses that were actually there. It's got stories of these places, these hotels owned by Japanese folks. There's a story, there's a whole map of the Tide Flats, actually, because there was a little Japanese community out there as well. One of my favorite parts really of the site, though, are these photos that descendants have sent to me. So Japanese Americans, we had a really big, thriving population here. At one point, there were like 180 businesses owned by Japanese Americans in Tacoma. I know. And so, anyway, after, once Pearl Harbor happened and Executive Order 966 happened, they all basically, this whole downtown core practically packed up their things, sold them, whatever, got rid of them, and walked across Pac Ave to Union Station, where they took the trains for a camp called Pinedale in California. And after that, they went to Tule Lake, where our family was as well. So, all of those sort of intersections got me really interested. After the war, a lot of those folks did not come back. There are definitely a few descendants of folks still around, still here, but for the most part, the Japanese American community is very tiny and has really not been the same since then. So there will all these descendants now who are doing genealogy work, and so they'll come to me and say, they'll find my site or something, and they'll write to me and say, I have, my grandpa owned this hotel. Can you, take a picture of what that was, or do some research about that address? And some descendants will actually send photos of their family's businesses, and so those are also on the site. So, the site is partly for descendants doing genealogy work, but it's also for folks who might not know, right, about Tacoma's Japantown. So I basically offloaded everything I know about Tacoma's Japantown and put it onto this site. One of the other things that I've done is held an annual Day of Remembrance. Day of Remembrance, usually in the Japanese American community, is commemorated on February 18th when President Roosevelt signed the executive order to authorize the forced removal of Japanese Americans. And we decided to hold our Day of Remembrance so as to not conflict with that, but to also commemorate the days, May 17th and 18th, that Japanese Americans were removed from Tacoma. So every year, in partnership with the Washington State Historical Society, we've done a Day of Remembrance, and it's taken different forms. Sometimes we've done artist things and panel things, film screenings, performances, and walking tours. And the walking tour has been probably one of those popular things that people will come to. So this is me in the rain. This last year at the Tacoma Buddhist Temple, we kind of started at the other end of downtown, walked our way through, and stopped at different sites where things were. And we end up with the one thing, really, that's still remaining, still built during the Depression, and is our last actual building from that era, still serving a Japanese American community. And so in that mural that we showed you earlier, the wall mural that Kenji did, he has this crest, and so that is basically the sort of unofficial Day of Remembrance crest. It's got barbed wire around it. The middle of it combines the kanji for each Nissan for 1, 2, 3, so the first, second, and third generations all put together. And so Kenji also has that in his thing. And it was actually, I believe, created by a Seattle graphic design professor for the very first Day of Remembrance, which was held out in Puyallup. Seattle and then Puyallup. So it's got a lot of really deep history, and so I've tried to just kind of extend that tradition a little bit to make people more aware of Tacoma's history as well. Let's see. Okay, last bit of our talk really is talking a bit more about our family, and I told you earlier that we were talking about memory and loss. And so in 1983, our dad died unexpectedly. He was a librarian at Cal State Sacramento, and we think it was some form of asbestosis, right? They were doing construction at that site, and the construction workers were given protection, the library workers were not. And so people kept calling in sick, and I think, and our dad was head of circulation, so he was kind of filling that in. So, we had really, so I had 10 years with my dad, Teruko had 6 years with him, but they were really important and rich years. And so ever since then, really, I've been working on ways to process that loss through my writing. And so I have a book coming out next spring in April called The Place for What We Lose, and it is how I learned finally, after decades, to process that grief. So on the left there is a Dharma figure. I think Kenji has a Dharma figure in this mural as well, but maybe not. Anyway, on the story about the pile of pages on the left-hand side is that our dad wrote a memoir in the, I believe, 1960s, early 1970s. And it was a memoir of his incarceration from when he was 10 to 14. And he tried to get it published a few times, but it never got published. And so I eventually asked for that book and had been carrying it around in this manila envelope for decades, just to try to figure out, eventually I want to do something with it. I'm not quite sure what that will be. And what I decided is that I wanted a memoir that was an intergenerational memoir, a dialogic memoir, because there are a lot of memoirs now that are about this experience that are first person told right from the point of view of people who survived this. Not very many memoirs by descendants, and particularly descendants who are really doing the deep emotional work of what it is to inherit this history. it still leaves its mark on a lot of things today, and as we see, is being repeated mercilessly today. So it took me a long time. I've been working on this book for 15 years. And I wanted to figure out what I was going to do with with my dad's book. So I didn't include the whole book, but I had to figure out which parts of it I wanted to include, but also make sure that I was telling enough of his story, right, so that people could follow his journey. So anyway, in 2010, I was grieving the loss of my career. I had just been denied tenure, and I was in some pretty deep career grief. And being the grief avoidant person that I am, I turned from that grief to an older grief and decided that I would reopen this manuscript that I hadn't read since I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And so this book then is the journey of me figuring out how to really confront and process that grief and read his book. And I do a bunch of things with it. So I kind of cut up the table of contents into sections and annotated those. There are places where I kind of triangulate, because he talked about like kite flying contests in his book, and I was like, kite flying contests? Who do that? So I went and did research about the camp newspapers that actually talk about kite flying contests. So kind of corroborated his experience. And there's at least one place where I strongly disagree with his book. But because he, part of it is the story of our grandfather, and how our grandfather was arrested from within the camp, taken to a bunch of different jails after that. And he missed his dad so much that he said, in his book, "What's a family without a father?" What's a family without a father? And his answer in the book was almost nothing. Right? Yeah, almost nothing. And so that was a place where I respectfully, but very strongly disagreed, because we grew up in this amazing extended family. After our dad died when we were so young, we still have that extended family. We still have that extended family network. So there are a bunch of things that I did with his book, and then eventually I went on a community pilgrimage to Tule Lake, where our family was incarcerated, and I went with our family members, some of them who were also there. So, it's light reading, but it really takes in what it is to confront that grief on a bunch of different levels. And I don't think very many books do that kind of work, and so I hope that this will fill that kind of space that other books about the incarceration do not. So that's what we have here. And just to bring it back, all the way back to our house, I just wanted to read you a tiny bit of the book itself. The house was not a space for hiding or flaunting. It was a space for protecting what my parents loved and needed the most. As a child, I didn't realize what a small miracle that home was. A product of not just one, but 2 immigrant cultures. A place where fermented shrimp paste and soy sauce could live next to each other, sometimes uneasily, in the refrigerator door. A place where my parents had fought to carve out their American dream and plant American roots despite my father's sharecropping past, his 4 years of wartime imprisonment, and my mother's life of uprooting, first as an immigrant and then as an army brat. For the first 10 years of my life, it was where I felt safest, where I felt loved, where I felt proud of being Japanese, Filipino, American. So, that's just a very small bit. It will really give folks a sense of what it is. I talk more about our childhood in the book and our trips to Japan, which were amazing and we didn't get to talk about here, and then also what it is to really reckon with all of that loss, and then how to try to redeem some of that loss through the work of memory and the work of making art. So, where you can find our work, there are a few few places. There's that tiny picture of baby Teruko there. But a bunch of places, we'll leave this slide up so people can just kind of check out other places to find us. My book will be coming out in April, and I'll be speaking at the Puyallup Day of Remembrance at the Fairgrounds in February, and then Tacoma's event will be on the 21st. Teruko's working at the TAM store, better get to. And there should have the Manaki-neko sculptures, right? Or at Art Exchange?
Three are at
There's an Art Exchange.
Right now in Seattle.
Okay, and then at the Postmark Center for the Arts.
Yep.
And then is there anything else you wanted?
And Seattle Center, I mean, I already mentioned all of that. The Seattle Center, that will be up through probably April of next year, depending if it survives or not. It's like, we'll see how the weather takes it. And then I also have a little piece at the Tacoma Public Library main branch. I actually work there now as one of the remakers at the Remakery. If you haven't been there, you should come if you love like art and fabric and fun stuff and you like saving the environment. But we're on the second floor. But I have a piece that I made with the family students for that exposition. That's a dragon. It's a big dragon that's made out of all recycled materials and work with the public as well as the Sami students to make that dragon, and they each made a dragon that explored topics about sustainability and environmental awareness.
So thank you so much for coming tonight. We are don't have as many formal questions, you can come up and see Teruko's card streamers. You can sign up for my author newsletter over here. Really, though, we would love to hear comments, questions, anything else that you might want to throw at us. Mizu?
So I'm a third generation Japanese man, a little bit older than you are.
We're young,
I'm
Sansei.
70, but I'm an artist and I have written various things. And most of my life has been trying to put together my own family history and what it means for the pieces that I got in my family, what that means to be a Japanese living at this time with advocacy. And I think it's beautiful, we've captured it beautifully, and we'll communicate it to the rest of the world. We're not only exactly.
That's so kind. Other comments, questions? Oh, yeah.
Where did your father's family come from?
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima? Okay, I was looking at the New Year's soup.
Oh, yeah, the ozoni.
Yeah, I was trying to guess where it was from.
Yeah, there's different regions, right, that have different styles of the soup, right, which I didn't know for a long time. Yeah, Hiroshima. So, but we have artist family members over there too. So there really must be something in our DNA that's artistic. So one of our dad's cousins is a sculptor. And then there's a cenotaph in Peace Park that looks like this, like it's a granite arch, and he was the sculptor who actually sculpted that. And then we have another cousin, dad's cousin, who was like a painter and a musician as well. And to have these sort of non-traditional folks in Japanese families is kind of, I think, rare. But yeah, lots of art in our family. Okay.
Can you tell a little bit about your relationship with speaking and reading Japanese?
Oh gosh. So our dad played a lot of Japanese records for us, like kids records growing up, and I feel like that kind of helped us with kind of internalizing that and the pronunciation. They spoke English too. We spoke English at home. And then both of us tried to pick up Japanese through various classes and things like that later. I'm still trying to get back into it. So yeah, not as much as I would like is my short answer.
Agreed. And I feel sad about that, really. Like I really wish that we would have been able to grow up speaking both languages as well as English. But
there was no Japanese school in the area for us to go to.
But I feel like with like Philippine, like the Tagalog,
Yeah.
it was almost like she didn't want us to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she has a whole other, like, our mom has a whole other relationship, right, to Tagalog. Because she came over to the States when she was young. There were no ESL classes. They thought she was dumb, right? So they put her back grade levels. And then at home, and I think this is probably pretty common, at home, they were like, no, you have to speak English. So now she really has to overcome a lot to actually be able to speak Tagalog. But she can understand a fair amount of it still, I think. So yeah, I wish we had too. Let's see, I saw Abby first and then Maureen. So,
Actually, speaking of your mom, and without like wanting to turn away from this current work, do you see, I know that you both as artists are really intuitive, do you see work in your futures looking at your Filipina
oh yeah.
heritage as well?
Yeah.
Like, can you give us a teaser of like what you would like to do?
You go first.
I have so much, like, I'm really interested in the indigenous, like, tattooing that is done. It's very ceremonial. I have a lot of, and there's so much symbolism and storytelling involved in that. And so I've been testing some things on ceramic pieces, doing this kind of melding of the maneki neko with some of that tattooing on that, and just what that is. It's still very in the like beginning stages of that work, but I think it's a really rich place that I want to go toward, as well as all the sort of textile work of like weavings and things that are in that side of our culture.
Yeah, I have this novel in my head, but I have this whole fear of writing fiction that I'm trying to get over. But I would really love to write a novel kind of based on our mom's story, because it's
And you
really...
did the children's book for her.
Yes, and I did write a children's book for her. I did. It was a little kids book that I haven't tried to do anything with since then.
But I think that's something.
You think that's something too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I still want
those two things. Those two things.
as well.
Okay, Brandy.
I know that once upon a time, a version of this book was going to be a collaborative effort between the two of you.
Oh, yeah.
And that the working title had been The Wait,
Oh, yeah.
which I was pro. Like, I thought that was a great double, like what's left behind, but also the grieving. And I know you told me, but why did you change from that title, from The Wait? Because I still think that's so evocative. The new title is evocative too, but it's so much more directed.
I think I was turning away from The Wake because for me it didn't, I mean, it is super evocative, it's got all those double meanings, right? But it didn't quite say enough. And then for a little while, if I forget a few years, the book was called Pilgrimage, right? Because it was so centered on the community pilgrimage. And then I was like, that's not the right title either. And then there was a blog post that I wrote years and years and years ago about this quote that I found in a letter from Freud. He was writing this letter to his young son, writing a letter to a friend who had lost their young son. And the letter said, we find a place for what we lose. Or we make a place shaped just like loss. And I was like, oh, that kind of has to be it, right? And it was all about, that, the book is, very place heavy, place based, but it's also paradoxical, right? Because really, like, how do you find a place for what you lose? It's so weird. How does that work? And then making a place shaped just like loss. And so there are a bunch of places in the book that I think are, shaped like my loss, right? There's my dad's book. There's an altar that I have in my house, kind of, for all of our lost dead. There's the place of the pilgrimage. And I was like, okay, this is where, that's it. But I don't remember why I turned away from the wake necessarily. I think that one image was about, watching me and standing at the back of a ferry boat, right? Just watching that wake go behind. And, wakes are not a tradition that I grew up with either, so that didn't quite seem to fit. That might be why I turned away.
And you know, also, I think it's age, because I think that was a
no, exactly.
title in our 20s, maybe.
15 freaking years.
So, but I mean, you know, like the abandonment issue, the
Oh,
people
yeah.
that being left behind, what are we left with?
Yeah, what are we left
but
with?
You have just aged into
Yeah.
brilliant women who know that you have that agency to make some new place for it, right?
Yes.
Hi, my name's Claudia. I'm Filipino as well.
You know Celia, don't you? You know, Celia. My oldest, maybe not, okay.
Oh my god, oh my god. But I came here because I saw the post and I've been watching the work you've been doing with like Suitor for Solidarity too, and also just really admiring that from afar and being proud to be Filipino and seeing you as a strong leader in the community. And I have a question about how does your rich and like complex history of your background inform your view on what's happening right now with the mass detainment of migrants? And is there parts where your like writing and art intersect with that?
It's honestly, for me anyway, it is traumatic as heck. I've been carrying my ID with me, you know, for months now. And I think one of the hardest things for me anyway is that I feel like, you know, our elders, you know, our first generation and a lot of our second generation folks devoted so much of their lives, right, to saying this is not going to happen again, right? This is not happening again, not in our name, not on our watch. And here it is, right? Here it has been, I know, but here it is even more so and more prominently. So there's this activist that I follow on Instagram named YK Hong, who came up with this formulation that I've been using a lot when I talk about this, and that she says they are trying to erase this history, like quite literally, like these signs are disappearing from places, right, national parks and so on. They're trying to erase this history in order to repeat it. And what in my optimistic moments, which are not many these days, I like to think that thinking of the Japanese American incarceration experience allows for a broader form of cross-racial solidarity, and has, right, in places like the detention center across the way there. But it is still really hard to process and to sort of, just to watch it happening over again, even though so much of our community tried so hard to have it not happen again.
My name's Tamiko. I'm actually fifth generation Japanese American. My family is from Hawaii. My grandpa is Sansei, and his sister was my great auntie. And I just recently lost her, and I'm her namesake, so she was also in the Tacoma. So I'm really feeling that right now, and so I relate to that loss and feeling sort of a loss of connection to your culture. So I was just wondering if there's anything that you have read or anything that you maybe wrote, maybe for your book that you'd maybe like to share that felt sort of like a turning point in your journey when you lost your dad.
Oh yeah, actually. Without giving too much away, really when I went on community pilgrimage was a really huge cathartic moment for me. And it really allowed me to feel all the layers of loss, right? Like I was feeling, I felt that that the loss of losing my job. I missed my dad not being there. I was there with family. I was walking with these community members, with these family members, right, who had done that. And quite honestly, it just let me cry. The book could kind of be called How Tamiko Learned How to Cry. And truly, it's a skill that I'm learning. Grief is a skill. Grief is a skill, right? And it's something that I really did not learn for a very long time. So there are spaces now where, if I'm in choir now, and I cry like all the time when I'm in choir, which is not something that I would normally do. But I think just allowing that space, allowing that place for what we lost is something that's really important to me now. And I have a little altar in our home now, right? Like as our loved ones. Whereas maybe a younger version of myself would have said, "Oh, we can't have these pictures. They remind us too much of that sadness." But that sadness is still there, right? So to find an actual space, I think, to feel that and to remember it is really important. So, yeah, that's I hope that answers your
Yes,
question.
my auntie actually kept an altar for her parents, so that's something I'd love to.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah,
So,
no,
make it there.
I think it's really important to have that space. Hi.
So I also wanted to ask, I was just curious how your parents met. Like
Oh.
what their love story.
Oh, it's a good
Oh,
one.
their love story is so fun. Okay, I talk about it. It's in my book, and I actually went back to my mom because my dad proposed twice. So we had to they met at a library. So they met at the library where my dad was working, and she was one of the students there, like a senior. So not entirely inappropriate, but he was her supervisor, and she had this long, beautiful black hair. And he first learned about her because she got her hair caught in the glue machine. So they used to tape in, those card pockets, right? And they had this glue machine for that. That's how he first heard about her. And then he met, and then they just started becoming friends, and they dated, and he proposed while she was still working, I think, and she thought he was joking, so she said no. And then later on, she graduated, went away, and then they got married. But yeah, the library.
At a library.
At a library. You all have hung in here for a really long time, so thank you so much.